had built many wells back then to replenish fresh water, some repairing the walls. Wang Mezi lay by the well like that, staring into the water, as if possessed by some evil. He boiled a jade bracelet with one hand and walked to the table beside him, kicked up the teapot and poured himself a bowl of tea, then poured another cup of tea and brought it to Wang Mezi. Standing beside Wang Mezi, he said softly, "Wang Mezi, I'm here. Take your time and speak the truth. You're a bit suspicious now." As his words fell, Wang Mezi, whose body was still clearly weak, suddenly turned around and looked at Chen Fan, his hands trembling slightly as he took the tea bowl, tears glistening in his eyes. He said in a trembling voice, "Master, I've been tricked all day long." Chen Fan couldn't hold back the tea he had just put in his mouth and sprayed it all over Wang Mezi's face. After calming down, Chen Fan took a deep breath and set the tea bowl aside, slowly sitting by the well. After a long silence, he said softly, "Did you encounter a ghostly realm that can create illusions? Tell me the whole process from start to finish." Heavens, this is too absurd. 80% chance it's possession, right? Perhaps because of the tea sprayed on his face, Wang Mezi now seemed much calmer and began to sink into recollection. 3 days ago, I led the members of the Merchant Guild, following the Master Yu's orders to explore the depths of the new continent, and discovered an enormous deep pit. We flew for a full day. Before landing at the center of the pit, the ground inside the deep pit was like obsidian with a glassy sheen, as if formed by a massive impact. After landing, I had the Merchant Guild members pair up and search everywhere, but just then, I suddenly felt a powerful suction force coming from below. The next moment, a crack suddenly appeared in the ground at the center of the deep pit and sucked me in. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself in a rocky cave deep underground, with no gaps around, but strangely, I could breathe normally and felt nothing unusual. As soon as I woke up, I tried to use a sound transmission talisman to contact the Merchant Guild members on the surface, but it didn't work. Not because of distance, it simply couldn't be activated. The cave walls weren't large, and there was nothing, completely empty. Just then, I saw a line of text on the wall, carved into it, not in any language I recognized, like a child scribbles, randomly drawn. But when I saw that line of text, I immediately entered a place that might be an illusion. My consciousness floated in the air, floating extremely high, overlooking the entire new continent. Wang Mezi paused for a moment, then couldn't help but stand up again, and said in a trembling voice, "That should have been where we were thousands of years ago." 7 lines of defense stretching thousands of kilometers stood like antennas along the coastline, and behind the walls, many people were constantly transporting various supplies. Outside the defenses were countless ghostly creatures covering the sky and earth. So many. Meanwhile, I saw every region of the new continent being attacked by massive waves of ghost nests at the same time. I don't know how long I watched. I saw the new continent slowly fading away, one ghostly flame after another extinguishing, eternal night gradually covering the entire new continent, until only one last area remained, with only a few humans still hiding behind the city walls, making their final stand. I saw a ghost emerge from the ghost nest. That ghost was dozens of meters tall, with 3 heads and 6 arms, each hand holding a massive hammer. That giant ghostly realm looked up at me, its voice loud, almost shaking heaven and earth. It asked me whether I was willing to become the heavenly Dao of their ghost clan. I could even clearly see its gaze falling on me. Only then did I realize that this perspective overlooking the entire continent, it was from the perspective of the heavenly Dao. My mouth opened, wanting to speak, but I couldn't utter a single word. My body felt as if it was no longer under my control. I took one last look at the new continent gradually being swallowed by the surging liquid, and suddenly let out a laugh. Then, I exploded. A massive explosion. Bone-piercing pain surged through my entire body. The last thing I saw before being knocked unconscious was the enormous blast that carved a deep crater into the plain. Meanwhile, the torrent of multicolored light burst from the explosion's center, instantly rushing toward the star continent. That 3-headed, 6-armed fiend turned into a mist of blood in an instant. Every fiend that touched the multicolored light was reduced to a bloody pulp, and even the remaining humans were turned into blood mist along with them. As for the fiends farther from the new continent, not yet landed, they fled in panic toward the distant thunderstorm over the sea region. But when the multicolored light touched the thunderstorm sea, it immediately dissipated. Only a small number of fiends managed to charge into the thunderstorm sea and escape by sheer luck. When I woke up again, I was already in Africa. The Xianxia members said they had searched for me for 3 days and finally found me at the spot where I had vanished, right at the center of the crater. Then they started bringing me back. After I regained full consciousness, my first thought was to tell you about this news. You've probably said everything there is to say. Wang Mezi, who had been somewhat terrified, now seemed much more relaxed. The term heavenly Dao, for someone like Wang Mezi, a native of Janbei, was akin to a deity. Just hearing the word filled him with fear, let alone experiencing the perspective of the heavenly Dao. Chen Fan stood silent, expressionless, remaining still for a long time. He understood now. Wang Mezi hadn't become the heavenly Dao, but had entered the perspective of the new continent's heavenly Dao, witnessing up close the scene of the new continent's final battle. It was like when he had obtained the imperial sister of the undying celestial master and witnessed the final battle of ancient Jiangbi. This was a perfectly normal phenomenon. What was abnormal was that his perspective had been the undying celestial master, while Wang Mezi's perspective was the heavenly Dao. After a long silence, Chen Fan turned to Wang Mezi with a complex expression and said softly, "Mezi, that multicolored light born from the heavenly Dao's self-destruction, which enveloped the entire new continent, and even the nearby sea, was able to annihilate all fiends. Its power was certainly not weak, yet that thunderstorm sea managed to firmly withstand such explosive force, and even provided shelter for some fiends. So this shows just how terrifying the thunderstorm sea is. Can you tell me how you manage to travel back and forth through the thunderstorm sea twice?" Wang Mezi stood frozen, only then realizing that he had apparently done something incredibly absurd. He scratched the back of his head, lost in thought, and after pondering for a long time, hesitantly said, "I just went through it like that." Although the thunderstorm sea had heavy rain and strong winds, with constant lightning and thunder, the lightning never struck the ship. The fiends in the thunderstorm sea didn't attack the ship either. As long as you were lucky enough not to be swept away by the waves, and the ship didn't capsize, you could get through. Chen Fan remained silent, saying nothing. If it were really that simple, it would be fine. He guessed that Wang Mezi must have been extremely lucky, just happening to stumble upon the only safe path through the thunderstorm sea, and even managed to take that path both ways. After a long while, Chen Fan then patted Wang Mezi's shoulder and said with a light smile, "Relax, you only saw the final war of the new continent from the perspective of the heavenly Dao. There's no need to be so terrified, but we need to speed up Fan Yu's development a bit to prevent the eternal night continent's heavenly Dao from thinking the front lines might not hold, and following the new continent's heavenly Dao and self-destructing. That would be quite troublesome." Wang Mezi nodded, and after finishing speaking with the prison master, he felt much more at ease in his heart. Then, he handed the map recording the location of the ancient battlefield to Chen Fan. With that, the matter came to an end. Then, he had Wei Wei ride on Fidor and embark on an exploratory journey with Xianxia. However, this time's target was the deep pit that Wang Mezi had just finished exploring. Wei Wei lay on Fidor the entire time, curious and excited, feeling the sensation of flying through the air. But after 3 days of travel, when the outline of the deep pit gradually came into view, the laughter in his lantern-sized eyes suddenly froze. At that moment, he had only one thought. Please, don't let there be earth gold here. If there was earth gold, how long would he have to dig? But when Fidor landed at the edge of the deep pit, Wei Wei quickly turned around, looked back at the massive patch of earth gold, then raised his flat head to gaze at the endless expanse of the pit, and for the first time, a human-like despair appeared in his eyes. There really was earth gold here, and a massive amount of it. Everyone stepped down from Fidor, standing at the edge of the deep pit, each one extremely excited. Xianxia had discovered a large batch of earth gold on the new continent, another great achievement. Everyone was thrilled, except Wei Wei, who stood frozen in place, staring blankly into the distance, looking somewhat out of place. Only Wang Mezi took a deep breath and quickly made up his mind to return. He would report to the prison master in person. This matter was too significant. It had to be reported face to face. Another 3 days passed. By then, Chen Fan had already returned to Fanyu to handle affairs within the camp. Just then, the sound transmission talisman in his arms suddenly grew warm. It was Wang Mezi, prison master, Wei Wei, and I found a massive vein of earth gold under that deep pit. Chen Fan's eyes lit up, and he smiled. An unclaimed continent is truly wonderful. No need for disputes. By default, it's all mine. This is good news. Xianxia has merit, but our main method of extraction right now is Wei Wei. We don't have any better means of mining besides him. Wei Wei's current mental state is somewhat dazed. To extract it all, I'm afraid it would take nearly 10 years. Chen Fan's mouth twitched. He had forgotten about this. A pit created by a heavenly Dao self-destructing was bound to be enormous. Having Wei Wei dig it all alone, that really was a lifetime job. Wei Wei would basically spend half his life in that deep pit, slowly digging away, digging until the end of time. After a moment, he cut off the transmission with Wang Mezi and contacted Zhao Shengding, who was in the weather pavilion of Fanyu. Zhao Shengding, let me ask you something. Can a hoe made from earth gold speed up digging? It can. Zhao Shengding's reply through the sound transmission talisman was resolute, but his voice still carried a hint of confusion. Of course, earth gold is a very good material among heavenly treasures. A hoe made from earth gold would definitely speed up digging. But this is like using a precious item for a trivial task. Chen Fan cut off the transmission with Zhao Shengding again, and reconnected with Wang Mezi. Calm Wei Wei down. Tell him he doesn't need to dig it all out. Just a portion is enough. He can take his time digging later. Time passed quietly like this, quickly slipping by. 20 days flew by in an instant. As the dark clouds dispersed, the rainy season ended, and the first day after the rainy season, Jianbei slowly regained its usual bustle. Chen Fan, holding his jade-handled staff, stood on the city wall of the rainy season defense line, gazing at the long-awaited clear, boundless sky. Looking down at the northern wasteland beyond the river, he chuckled softly without speaking. The rainy season ended. Within this month, Fan Yu, free from any interference, developed at an astonishing pace. The mining progress on the new continent was also quite gratifying. After the rainy season ended, Fan Yu of the north began to spread among the various factions and the Guangxi plain. Among them, the one with the greatest understanding of Fan Yu's information was the immortal slaying sacred ground. The sacred lord of the immortal slaying sacred ground was now sitting silently at the tea table, gazing at the reports handed in by his subordinates, the corners of his mouth twitching uncontrollably. Over a decade ago, he learned that that person had left Nameless Mountain and was trapped somewhere, and had left behind a great formation within Nameless Mountain, capable of nurturing snow lotuses to maturity, following the principle that onless treasures belong to the fated, and that heaven does not take what is unclaimed. Heeding the old way of claiming what is left behind, he sent people there. He personally dispatched Yu Ninga to lead the team, lurking in the city nearest to Nameless Mountain Jianbei City, within the Jianbei Chen clan. But the moment the snow lotuses in Nameless Mountain matured, they were to seize them in a perfect plan. He even sent Xiaoqiu, the one who had once founded the Vision God Hall and the Guangxi Plain, along with other exceptional talents. Yet, during the last rainy season, Yu Ninga's life tablet shattered, and the life tablets of the rest of the group were also completely broken. As for Xiaoqiu, he was likely dead too. The immortal slaying sacred ground had no life tablet for Xiaoqiu, so he knew this group had met with great misfortune. Still, he didn't send anyone else to Nameless Mountain. After all, the task of retrieving the snow lotuses from Nameless Mountain wasn't rated particularly high within the immortal slaying sacred ground, not worth sending more people. He had nearly forgotten about this matter entirely, until recently, when he suddenly heard of Fan Yu's rise. Its master, Chen Fan, was none other than the illegitimate son expelled from the Jianbei Chen clan. Back in the day, the sacred lord of the immortal slaying sacred ground sat at the tea table, beginning to trace the logical connections. He had to determine whether Fan Yu and the immortal slaying sacred ground actually had any enmity. There should be no grudge, right? Chen Fan being cast out of the Jianbei Chen clan, that wasn't something he authorized. He felt a bit of fear toward Fan Yu. After a long while, Tar, the sacred lord of the immortal slaying sacred ground, let out a long sigh of relief, and laughed. The logic is clear, there should be no enmity. Those matters shouldn't be laid at the immortal slaying sacred ground's door. Just then, the door to the chamber was pushed open, and another piece of news was delivered to the tea table. The master of Fan Yu's shadow pavilion is named Xiaoqiu. The smile on his face slowly froze in place. Xiaoqiu hadn't died, and he joined Fan Yu, so now there is enmity, isn't there? No, this still can't count as enmity, right? It was true that he had imprisoned Xiaoqiu, but Xiaoqiu had infiltrated his immortal slaying sacred ground. Imprisoning him wasn't excessive. If there was any grudge, it was between Xiaoqiu and the immortal slaying sacred ground, not something to drag Fan Yu into. He muttered under his breath. The great elder, sitting to the side with a completely expressionless face, had long grown accustomed to this. This was the sacred lord's way of handling things. He was used to it. Another 3 days passed. After the rainy season ended, a cold wind swept from the north across the Guangxi plain, and along with this wind came Fan Yu. Almost overnight, many in the Guangxi plain had already learned that a mysterious force had risen in the north, called Fan Yu. Meanwhile, in Immortal City beside the immortal slaying sacred ground, Xiaoqiu was leading members of the Shadow Pavilion, sitting in the highest, top-floor private room of a tea house in the city, gazing through the window at the mountain peak not far away, his eyes brimming with eagerness. On that mountain peak stood the immortal slaying sacred ground. 8 years ago, he had attempted to infiltrate the immortal slaying sacred ground and failed. Now, his cultivation had long broken through to Martial King, reaching the 14th level. Moreover, he had in hand bricks forged by goblins, dances, and night-working garments. He desperately wanted to try once more whether he could advance. Unfortunately, this time he was burdened with a mission. He needed to head to the Guanan Plain. He couldn't attempt it recklessly. With that, he set down the teacup in his hand. He walked out of the private room and headed downstairs. His mission was to investigate the coastal defense situation of the Guanan Plain. He needed to travel all the way south to gather as much relevant information as possible. Then, before the rainy season this year, return to the Fan Domain to report his findings. Another month passed. Xiaoqiu and his team had been traveling tirelessly for days. Finally, they arrived at Zhengui Pass. His buttocks felt like they were about to split in two. Xiaoqiu grumbled as he jumped off his skeletal horse. He looked ahead at Zhengui Pass. Beyond this point lay the Guanan Plain. Zhengui Pass was a ruined defensive line. Let's find a place to rest. He led his skeletal horse strode toward a station beneath the ruins. Come, gentlemen, this way, please. The attendant who received them was quite enthusiastic. The attendant led Xianxia and the others into the inn. Then, with a sly wink, he said, "So, gentlemen, what would you like to play? Find some fun to make up for it." Xianxia sighed helplessly. The service here was indeed different. A temporary rest stop, and they were already running a business like a brothel. "Do you want to play? I can find two for you. Look here, do you prefer the young ones or the older ones?" "Sir, you misunderstand. We don't have that here, it's not that kind of game." "Then what kind of game is it?" "Gentlemen, please follow me to the back courtyard and take a look." Soon, the brute followed the attendant to the back courtyard. Soon, a cacophony of noise reached their ears. Around an octagonal cage on a platform in the courtyard, nearly 100 people were gathered, cheering and urging. Inside the cage, two ghost beasts were constantly baring their fangs and snarling threats at each other. The two ghost beasts were already covered in blood, their bodies riddled with wounds. Clearly they were on the verge of death. "This is called ghost fighting," the attendant introduced from the side. "You can place bets before it starts, on which ghost beast you think will win," the attendant explained beside them. But Xianxia was completely stunned on the spot. He looked up at the sun hanging in the sky. "This isn't dusk, is it? And those in the cage aren't the ghost prison lords?" He was sent to assess the battle situation on the Guanan Plain. Now it seemed the Guanan Plain was reporting victory after victory. They were even capturing ghost beasts for fights. With this momentum, they must be about to counterattack, right? The eternal night hasn't fallen yet. So what's the deal with these ghost beasts? He was utterly baffled. In all his life, he had never seen such a sight. Tee-hee, the attendant chuckled smugly. This is unique in the world. Across the entire Eternal Night continent, you won't find another place with ghost fighting. Many of our guests come from far away just for this. What do you think? Interesting, isn't it? How about a round? I can find you a table, and have meat and wine brought over. You can eat and watch at the same time. Cherokee didn't speak. He silently pulled a notebook from his chest. These were all things he needed to report back. The outside world was too chaotic. After recording this information, Cherokee frowned deeply. He stared at the two ghost beasts in the cage, covered in wounds, clearly devoid of reason, constantly howling. Is it some kind of medical preservation? But the Eternal Night continent is so vast, it's normal to have preservation methods that let ghost beasts move during the day. Of course not, the attendant chuckled. He didn't hide it. He directly revealed the truth. Our inn is near the Ghost Pass ruins. These ghost beasts only survive during the day in the area outside the pass, the Guanan Plain. If brought inside the pass, even just a few steps away, even if it's just a few steps away, they would die instantly on the spot. Originally, it wasn't possible either, but after this rainy season passed, scattered ghost dwellings were discovered on the Kanto Plain that could survive in daylight. Xiaoqiu's brow furrowed tightly. He remained silent, saying nothing. No matter how you looked at it, this was abnormal. He didn't know. How could these people still have the leisure to engage in ghost fights? For ghost dwellings to survive in daylight was an extremely severe and disastrous omen for the entire continent. How could ghost dwellings survive in daylight? Unless half of the Kanto Plain had already fallen, only then would such a loophole appear. Once the No. 7 defense line collapsed, countless ghost nests would surge northward unimpeded, and before long they would be at the gates, reaching Janbei. Every living being along the way would perish. We must investigate and clarify immediately what the exact situation and condition of the No. 7 defense line on the Kanto Plain is. On the other side, by now, a month had passed since the rainy season ended. In this 1 month, Shenfan had consumed 356 million ghost stones, extending the original 14.8-kilometer rainy season defense line to 114.8 kilometers, still 55.2 kilometers short. The entire framework of his Janbei defense line could be completely built. It was no longer sufficient. Next, he only needed to wait another month for the mining on the new continent to finish constructing this Janbei defense line. A month later, Shenfan rose early, full of energy and in high spirits. After checking the ghost stone reserves in the breeding warehouse, he worked toward the city wall. Now, the rainy season defense line had been officially renamed the Janbei defense line. It no longer enclosed the breeding territory, but ran in an almost straight line along the Janbei coastline, still 55.2 kilometers short. Shenfan mounted the skeletal force and stood at the end of the Janbei defense line, gazing at the empty expanse ahead. After taking a deep breath, the skeletal horse began to gallop swiftly. Just as its hooves were about to land in midair, a rapidly formed 5th-level city wall steadily appeared beneath the hooves. The skeletal horse charged forward, as if the ground rose beneath its steps. With every stride, a new 5th-level city wall materialized ahead, until the sky gradually darkened. Shenfan slowly dismounted. Shenfan gripped the parapet with both hands. He looked ahead at the towering, cloud-piercing mountain peak. The Jianbei defense line was tightly connected to this mountain. This 55.2-kilometer stretch of defense had cost him nearly 200 million ghost stones. At this moment, the 170-kilometer Jianbei defense line had taken shape. Chen Fan stood atop the city wall, gazing at the gradually darkening sky. He glanced at the towering mountain peak beside him, linked to the Jianbei defense line, then looked toward the churning sea not far away. After a moment, he turned to look behind him at the endless defense line. He smiled. After a year and a half, for 170-kilometer long Jianbei defense line, uniformly built with fifth-level city walls, all bearing ghost cave patterns, all soaring into the sky. This line, a veritable miracle, had been completed by him for the breeding territory. It would guard Jianbei during the seabed ghost nest landing 2.5 years later. However, if the seabed ghost nests did not land early, he planned to upgrade this defense line to 6th-level city walls to ensure absolute safety. Chen Fang quickly returned to Wuming Mountain. The sky had gradually darkened. After a day of hard work, he felt somewhat weary. He brewed himself a pot of hot tea, then sat on the city wall of Cave No. 1. Listening to Wang Kui report by his ear, addressing him as prison master. Wang Kui, standing beside him, reported. It was now early March, just after the start of spring. These days, the mining progress on the new continent was quite good, with no accidents occurring. However, on the Guanan Plain, they still hadn't found an opportunity. The butcher immortal Saint Emperor sent someone to Fan Yu, delivering a substantial compensation, and wrote a letter, spanning several thousand words, declaring that there was no enmity between the breeding territory and the butcher immortal Saint Emperor. The propagation and the slaughter immortal Saint Emperor bear no enmity toward each other. It's all just misunderstandings. Willing to use ghost stones to make up for these misunderstandings, Chen Fan leaned back in his rocking chair. The corner of his mouth twitched slightly. His plan had been disrupted. His plan was simple: kill the chicken to warn the monkeys. With the force of thunder, he would annihilate a faction in the Guangxi Plains, using it to deter other restless forces. He had already chosen the chicken long ago. It was the immortal slaying sacred ground, which had once sent men to scheme for Nameless Mountain, and the Snow Lotus. But this one's methods truly left him uncertain. They had sent 3 letters in a row, each one discussing the beauty and ugliness of Fanyu and the immortal slaying sacred ground. Along with each letter came compensation. The amount was not small. With such a good attitude, he almost couldn't bear to strike, but without slaughtering a chicken, it would be hard to showcase Fanyu's power. He had already figured out how to kill the chicken. The ghost stones accumulated over these days were enough to forge a fleet of African ships. He would crush them with the momentum of thunder. But then he looked at the letter in his hand and let out a light sigh. The views in this letter didn't seem to have any real issues. The immortal slaying sacred emperor had never directly targeted him. Indirect influence that wouldn't do. Chen Fan's brow suddenly furrowed. After pondering for a while, he spoke. It must be done. Find a chicken to show our fists. Otherwise, in the future, the high-speed rail lines we lay across the Guangxi Plains will surely be sabotaged by some stray cats and dogs. We need to show our fists to intimidate other forces. Within a month, this chicken must be found. Then he stretched and worked down the city wall, planning to wash up and sleep. Today was quite tiring. He turned in early. He wondered how Xianxia was doing on his end. On the other side, night had fallen over the new continent. A sea vessel slowly docked at the harbor. How was today? The lame Marquis, standing atop the wall, looked at the returning alien form hall, reporting to the pavilion master. Today was still uneventful. The thunderstorm sea shows no signs of collapse. The lame Marquis nodded lightly, waving his hand to let the men enter the city. Fanyu had specially dispatched a sea vessel near the thunderstorm sea to observe every day. Once any sign of collapse appeared in the thunderstorm sea, they would report immediately, giving Fanyu time to handle it. Then he looked up at the distant ocean. His thoughts gradually drifted away. I wonder how his Fanyu is developing. Number 1 of the new continent was like a tireless machine. Under this machine's operation, large amounts of ghost soldiers, ghost valleys, and more were transported daily to Fanyu through the undersea tunnel. It had been over 2 months since the rainy season ended, some repairing the walls. He was starting to miss Fanyu. On an African ship hovering in the air over the new continent, Wang Mezi looked at the ghost skin map in his hand, his brow deeply furrowed. These past months, he had been exploring the new continent. After crossing that deep pit, he saw more and more cracks, spreading from the new continent's core outward, and whether it was an illusion or not, he vaguely felt that the cracks seemed to be extending outward, though at an extremely slow pace. These days, he had been tracing the source of these cracks, wanting to see what they really were. Night had fallen. He turned and worked into the cabin to sleep first. He'd leave the rest for tomorrow. In the Guandan Plains, Xianxia was leading some members of the Dark Pavilion, staying in an inn within a city, his expression somewhat grim. He had left Fanyu 2 months ago. Yesterday, he had reached the southernmost tip of the Guandan Plains. He saw that No. 7 defense line. The city wall was very tall, covered in blood ruins, even taller than the walls of Fanyu's rainy season defense line. Covered in blood clots, even taller than the city walls of the rainy season defense line. The 6th-level city wall stood like a heavenly barrier, perched along the coastline of the southern plains, seemingly indestructible. But in truth, during the rainy season over 2 months ago, Defense Line 7 nearly fell entirely. Yes, the Kanto Plain was lost in the rainy season. A swarm of ghost nests breached Defense Line 7 and rampaged across the Kanto Plain. Now, less than 30% of the Kanto Plain remains. Countless people have died, and just before Defense Line 7 fell, and the Kanto Plain was about to be officially overrun, the Eternal Night Hall sent men at any cost to contain the flood of ghost nests and held out until dawn, quickly repairing Defense Line 7. Thus, and during the entire rainy season, had the Eternal Night Hall arrived even a moment later, the breeding ground would likely no longer exist. This swarm of ghost nests would have surged northward, all the way to the gates of the breeding ground. The Eternal Night Hall sat on the bed, gazing out the window at Xianxia, muttering this name to himself. It was an immensely vast organization, with many factions joining its ranks, responsible for building and maintaining all defenses across the entire Eternal Night continent. One could say, it was the Eternal Night Hall that safeguarded the whole Eternal Night continent. But now, due to the extreme urgency of the frontline work, the Eternal Night Hall was also stretched thin. He had heard this name before, back when the breeding ground had not yet been formally established. The prison master was seeking a name for the faction among the elders. Wang Mezi proposed the Eternal Night Hall as the name idea. He wasn't present at the time. He hadn't yet joined the breeding ground back then. It was only later, when Wang Mezi chatted with him casually, that he mentioned it, with some emotion, though the breeding ground was a fine name too, but calling it the Eternal Night Hall would have been far more imposing. Beside the pavilion master, a member of the Shadow Pavilion whispered uneasily, "Should we return to the breeding ground immediately and report this news?" Xianxia glanced at his subordinate beside him, paused for a moment before speaking softly. "Don't rush. The pressure on the defense line only spikes during the rainy season. This rainy season has passed. There are still months until the next one arrives. During this time, Defense Line 7 likely won't collapse. You two set out immediately for the breeding ground. Report the news. Let the prison master know in advance, so he can be mentally prepared. The rest of us will stay in the Kanto Plain over these months to gather enough intelligence. At dawn tomorrow, follow me to join Defense Line 7 to observe up close." Dawn came quickly. And the two Shadow Pavilion members, had already mounted their skeletal horses and begun their return journey, ready to report the news. Meanwhile, Xianxia led the remaining Shadow Pavilion members, in disguise, leaving the city, heading toward Defense Line 7, only a few hundred meters from the city. At that moment, people were continuously carrying various ghost stones and weapons up onto the city wall. At the base of the wall, 2 months ago, the remnants of ghost creatures and the bloodstains of defenders from that great battle had been roughly clean, but the earth was still soaked into a strange purple-black. Tents and wooden huts dotted the base of the wall. A long line was forming. Many people queued up. The defense army was recruiting. Xianxia led the Shadow Pavilion members and joined the line. Soon it was their turn. Their cultivation. Marshal King, the recruiter, who hadn't lifted his head the whole time, sat at the table, and for the first time looked up at Xianxia. After sizing him up for a few glances, he nodded and said, "Thank you for joining. Your number is 179. Assigned to the 71st Squad of the 3rd Brigade, Defense Line 7. Go to the east, Hut 31, and report to your squad leader. He'll tell you the area you need to defend." A moment later, Xianxia stood on the city wall in silence, not speaking. He just gazed into the distance at the sea. The sea here was darker than the sea north of the river. Beyond the defense line, by the shore, has been completely stained by the ghost cave, into a purple-black mixed with various colors of light. Many people here, like ants, are digging ghost stones from the ghost dwelling's body and loading them into bags beside them. This is a defense line that has just endured a great battle. He finally understood why the breeding defense line was already far stronger than the defenses of the 4 regions north of the river, much stronger. In fact, even stronger than the originally estimated Northern River defense line. Yet the warden still always felt dissatisfied. The warden looks not only at the Northern River region, the warden sees further. He considers what would happen if the Eternal Night front line falls, how the breeding should handle itself. Within the immortal slaying sacred ground of the Guanxi Plains, the Grand Elder let out a long sigh and looked toward the sacred lord, who was tinkering at the tea table. He said hoarsely, "Do you feel you've done wrong? If 8 years ago, instead of drawing out Xianxia's one soul, you had directly killed him, perhaps, would there be no current lord of the breeding Shadow Pavilion? Xianxia, would that not have removed one calamity? Besides, even if the breeding is a suddenly rising force north of the river, its strength cannot be underestimated. But why did we have to send ghost stones 3 times? Our ghost stones didn't come from the wind, did they? Let alone other matters." Before the rainy season, the No. 7 defense line in the Guandan Plains came to request aid. "And you, Sacred Lord, gave them a large batch of ghost stones. Sacred Lord, do you feel like a money-dispensing child? Anyone can come and take money from you. The Sacred Lord of the Immortals laying sacred ground. With a serious expression, he looked up at the Grand Elder. I ascended to become the Sacred Lord of the Immortals laying sacred ground 9 years ago. In these 9 years, within the Immortals laying sacred grounds warehouse, the number of ghost stones has only increased, hasn't it? It has. The Grand Elder's tone suddenly weakened. Although the Sacred Lord has been dispensing wealth since you took the throne 9 years ago, the Immortals laying sacred ground has indeed developed better and better. The Sacred Lord let out a long sigh, stood up, and walked to the window. Back then, I didn't kill Xianxia, partly because of wealth, and partly because a mere 17-year-old could establish the divine temple of the world. With such high cultivation, I suspected someone behind him might not want his life taken, bringing future danger upon myself. Sending compensation to Fenyu was because I had overstepped. There was originally no enmity. If war broke out, even if we won, we would still consume ghost stones. By then, the ghost stones spent would far exceed this amount. Supporting the No. 7 defense line was because, if that line fell, do you think the Guanxi Plains could stand alone? Moreover, the No. 7 defense line relies on the eternal night call. Offending the eternal night call is no good thing. Then plotting for Wuming Mountain, aren't you afraid of offending that one? The Grand Elder couldn't help but speak up. How can that be considered offending? That's just Balu's logic. The Sacred Lord said seriously, that one has been gone for so long. The Snow Lotus is ownerless property. Whoever takes it owns it. And besides, I didn't even get it. The Grand Elder's mouth twitched, but he said nothing. Since the Sacred Lord took the throne, the immortal slaying sacred ground's enemies have grown fewer and fewer. One must note that the Guanxi Plains are constantly in turmoil. To have fewer enemies in such an environment is truly no easy feat. Every time a conflict arises, the Sacred Lord would sort through the logic, eventually reaching a conclusion that benefits both sides, then send an apology letter and compensation. Wars that were on the verge of breaking out would thus never start. Before the Sacred Lord took the throne, the immortal slaying Sacred Lord sent out only blood letters. After the Sacred Lord took the throne, the immortal slaying Sacred Lord sent out only apology letters. And truth be told, in this way, within the Guanxi Plains, while various factions were locked in chaotic battles, unable to extricate themselves, the immortal slaying sacred ground stood alone, developing extremely comfortably. Over the years, the warehouse's ghost stone reserves have only grown larger. It's just that going out feels a bit shameful. But it's much safer than before. Almost no more cold shoulders. Moreover, the Holy Lord of the Slaughter Immortal Sacred Land looked serious as he said, I just went over the logic again. The reason Fenyu hasn't replied to us is probably that the letter is still on the way. After all, the Guanxi Plains are a mess of battles everywhere. Our people, holding the banner of the Slaughter Immortal Sacred Land, can travel unimpeded all the way. If Fenyu wants to come to our Slaughter Immortal Sacred Land, it should be somewhat troublesome. It shouldn't be long before we receive Fenyu's reply. Tud. Aldolu didn't speak, sitting down silently. Although he always felt the Holy Lord's methods were extremely strange, looking at the results, this approach had no issues. The outcome was good. Just then, a sparrow carrying a letter landed on the windowsill. The Holy Lord opened the envelope and looked at its contents, a slight oddity on his face. These past few days, many merchant caravans from Jiangnan are heading to the Guanxi Plains. That guy from the Hatred Heaven sect killed all the caravans holding the Dead Chest banner. He put out word that any Jiangnan merchant caravan coming to the Guanxi Plains to trade would be killed on sight. That caravan belonged to the Binyang clan of Jiangnan, transporting a batch of skeleton horses. It gets stuck, perfectly normal. The Grand Elder said calmly. I've also heard recently that there's a batch of cheap skeleton horses in the market, and the Hatred Heaven sect itself has a business of selling skeleton horses. Now that their business is being stolen, they are naturally displeased. They want to kill a few people to vent. The Holy Lord clicked his tongue with some emotion, but according to our intelligence, the daughter of the Binyang clan of Jiangnan and an important figure of Fenyu have a marital relationship. If the Binyang clan finds Fenyu and asks him to step in, then who knows how things will unfold. That connection is too distant. The Grand Elder shook his head. Although, Holy Lord, I can't quite figure out your style, I can still understand how other faction leaders think. Fenyu won't step in for this. The dead aren't his people. Forcing a move is meaningless. Is that so? But I've gone over the logic again. If Fenyu wants to extend his high-speed rail line to the Guanxi Plains, he must kill a chicken to scare the monkeys to or the petty villains. Otherwise, Fenyu's high-speed rail line itself isn't hard to dig up. The Hatred Heaven sect isn't exactly a chicken. That depends on who you're talking about. The Holy Lord let out a dark chuckle. A faction that rose so quickly must have some hidden tricks up its sleeve. Here, this is the apology letter I just wrote. Send another one to Fenyu. Holy Lord, your moves are getting better and better. Practice makes perfect, naturally, and send this one to the Hatred Heaven sect too. Another apology letter. Some time ago, our Slaughter Immortal Sacred Lands disciples had some conflict with the Hatred Heaven sect's disciples. That was 6 months ago. Send one anyway. If the two sides really start fighting, and the Hatred Heaven sect suddenly unleashes its hidden strength and wins, what then? Send the apology letter first. Send one to Ghost Stone too, of course, who has time to apologize in person. Any more apology letters to send today? Not for now. Thank you for your hard work, Holy Lord. It's all for the development of the sacred land. It's only right. Fang Yu was sitting in a tea house, chatting idly with Big Fish, Ganyang Hospital. Suddenly, the communication talisman in his arms grew slightly warm. After hearing the news, he chuckled lightly, then fell silent for a moment before standing up and looking down at Big Fish. He suddenly smiled. Big Fish, if I asked you to leave Fang Yu and wander the world with me, would you be willing? No. Big Fish shook his head, then looked up at Ganyang Hospital, a hint of confusion in his eyes. A hint of doubt flickered in the hospital's eyes. Then it's nothing. Ganyang Hospital paused for a moment, then said. He barely managed to force a smile. Waving his hand, he walked out of the tea house. There are some matters at the clan. I need to go back and handle them first. He had reached the moment of being activated, but this time, he wasn't quite so willing to be activated. Big Fish stared at the retreating figure of Ganyang Hospital. Suddenly, he realized something. A flicker of panic flashed in his pupils. He dashed out of the tea house and raced toward the dark pavilion on Nameless Mountain. Something must have happened to the Ganyang clan. The dark pavilion was in charge of the breeding intelligence network. He wanted to know what had befallen the Ganyang clan. Was Ganyang Hospital about to be activated? The clan leader, Ganyang January, had already boarded the high-speed rail. He was on his way back. Are you really not going to seek help from breeding? Inside the shadow city of the Ganyang clan. This city, uniformly adorned with vine patterns, built at great expense. All the elders of the Ganyang clan had gathered. They were holding a meeting. They had just received news. The trade caravan they had dispatched had been completely plundered by a force called the Hate Heaven sect in the Guanxi Plains. The clan leader of the Ganyang clan sat in the patriarch's seat, his face dark as he spoke each word with difficulty. Breeding would never go to war against a top-tier force in the Guanxi Plains, just because of us. If we go begging to breeding, and they refuse, not only will we lose face, but how will Ganyang Yu ever hold her head up in breeding afterward? We'll handle our own affairs. I've already consulted the Supreme Elder. The Supreme Elder said he is ready to be activated at any time. We must strike back swiftly. The surrounding elders all fell silent, saying nothing. In truth, they all knew. Even if the Supreme Elder deployed a single Night Watcher, the threat it could pose to a top-tier force would be minimal. At best, it might cause no real damage. But since the clan leader had made up his mind, they said no more. Just then, suddenly, a rumbling sound came from above their heads. The clan leader of the Ganyang clan was startled. Unsure of what was happening, he led the elders out of the hall and looked up. Above the Shadow City, at some unknown moment, hundreds of airships had appeared, densely packed. One of the airships was slowly descending, preparing to land inside the Shadow City. On every airship clearly visible were mounted menacing turrets. These were airships. The clan leader of the Ganyang clan, his face instantly changed drastically. He had only heard of such vehicles in legends, never seen them in reality. Was this the work of the Hate Heaven sect? The top-tier forces of the Guanxi Plains were truly terrifying beyond measure. In comparison, the Ganyang clan's greatest asset, the Night Watcher, seemed utterly insignificant. The Shadow City had no anti-air defenses. They had no means to fight back. Just as the airship was about to land, the clan leader of the Ganyang clan screamed hysterically, shouting his final order, "Run! Flee the Shadow City. I'll hold them off." He didn't flee, he was the head of the clan. By staying, he could buy his people more time to escape. What's all the shouting about? The airship slowly touched down. Chen Fan stood on the deck of the airship, looking down at the panicked members of the Ganyang clan. He glanced up at the 99 airships hovering in midair, and grinned. How about it? Pretty impressive, isn't it? A full 100 fully equipped airships. Cost me quite a bit of ghost stone. The moment he received the news, he had started laughing. He had found the leverage in the Guanxi Plains, and it carried no small weight. Immediately, he upgraded the breeding vehicles, offense and defense to level 7, and built 100 airships. He spent 100 million in one go. In the breeding warehouse, only about 100 million ghost stones remained, but he believed it was worth it to take the Guanxi Plains, and it wasn't just to earn ghost stones. The main reason was his high-speed rail lines could open up connections. This also meant the scope of Fan Yu's influence would expand further. Everything became much easier. 100 ships, full display of force. He had also investigated the news about the Hatred Heaven sect. 100 ships were enough to take it down. What are you standing there for? Chen Fan, standing on the deck, looked down at the Ran clan members frozen in place below, and waved his hand. With a smile, he said, "Let's go. I'll take you to the Hatred Heaven sect." Meanwhile, a declaration of war against the Hatred Heaven sect spread rapidly across the entire Guangxi plain through Finiyu's intelligence network. Many people, upon receiving this declaration, were completely bewildered. Then they realized it was about the Hatred Heaven sect's actions against the Jiangnan Ram clan's merchant guild. The declaration spread too fast. Soon, it reached the Tuzayan Sacred Land. The Sacred Lord of Tuzayan Sacred Land looked at the declaration in his hand and said, "Let's go. Head to the Hatred Heaven sect to watch the show. Let's go now. We'll go early to grab a spot. Let's see what Faniyu is capable of." On the other side, inside the main hall, the sect master of the Hatred Heaven sect looked grimly at the declaration in his hand. Declaration of war against the Hatred Heaven sect. To the disciples of the Hatred Heaven sect on the Guangxi plain. Now, where the heaven's light does not shine, the Hatred Heaven sect, with ghostly and treacherous blades, secretly struck at the bloodline of my Faniyu, killing my core pavilion master. The Kiyu 7 clan's merchant convoy was ambushed at the Monsoon Gorge. This is no ordinary plunder. It is a deliberate trampling on the foundation of Faniyu. The Hatred Heaven sect has run my sworn brothers, violating the order of human bonds. This grudge is not a personal feud. It is a declaration of war against barbaric acts. If you still harbor a heart of benevolence, use it to protect life, not to slaughter. Step down immediately. Remove your robes and leave your post. Those who leave the sect and repent before Faniyu will be spared. Those who leave within 1 hour will not be held accountable. Half an hour later, the sect master of the Hatred Heaven sect crumpled the paper into a ball. He gritted his teeth and said, word by word, "This is too much." A force that suddenly rose north of the river, with no prior dealings with the Hatred Heaven sect, would pick a fight over an insignificant merchant convoy. Half an hour later, the man laughed in fury. Since Faniyu wants to be the one to step forward, then let them lose all face. Outside the main hall, a disciple in black strode in. Just then, he handed over a letter. "Sect Master, this is a letter from the Tuzayan Sacred Lord. It also comes with 10,000 ghost stones." After reading the letter, the sect master of the Hatred Heaven sect was somewhat puzzled. Such a minor conflict wouldn't normally even reach me. For such a trivial matter, a Sacred Lord personally writes a letter. Still, he felt quite flattered. The other party sent ghost stones as an apology and wrote to him personally. This was recognition of his Hatred Heaven sect. But then, a subordinate strode in again from outside the hall, reporting, "Sect Master, the Tuzayan Sacred Lord has personally brought people and is waiting on a slope 800 meters outside the sect gate." The sect master of the Hatred Heaven sect was stunned for a moment, then quickly reacted. He strode across the floor and headed out of the hall. "Elders, follow me out of the sect to welcome them." "Not bad, not bad. This spot will do." The Sacred Lord of the Tuzayan Sacred Land scanned the surroundings. 800 meters ahead lay the city of the Hatred Heaven sect. Its uniform 4th-level city walls made the city stand like a mountain anchor, firmly rooted in the Guangxi plain. He stood on the slope, gazing at the Hatred Heaven city. This angle is just right. It perfectly captures the entire city in view. If something is about to happen, this is the best vantage point. The Sacred Lord of the Tuzayan Sacred Land looked expectantly toward the distant horizon. Faniyu, the breeding bases. Suddenly, the gates of the Hatred Heaven city swung open. Just then, the gates of Hate Heaven city suddenly swung open. A group of people marched forward in a grand procession. The sect master of Hatred Heaven sect walked at the very front, leading the elders and disciples of Hatred Heaven sect. He strode directly before the Sacred Lord of Immortal Slaying Sacred Land, directed the scene. The group behind him laughed heartily, saying, "Ziwei, Lontem no Si, and the Guangxi Plains, everyone speaks of you, Sacred Lord, as one who cares for the world. Today, I finally see it for myself." When Janbei Faniyu, knowing not the height of the heavens, issued a challenge to Hatred Heaven sect, "Ziwei, you stood with the righteous in the 11th hour. This debt of gratitude, I accept. There's no need for that." The Sacred Lord of Immortal Slaying Sacred Land, lost in thought, stood still. Suddenly, he heard a hearty laugh by his ear. His brow furrowed. "What is this?" "Words." The Sacred Lord of Immortal Slaying Sacred Land, Yang, said angrily, "You and I are brothers. How could I stand by and do nothing for you?" "Brother, return quickly. It's cold outside. Don't catch a chill." Just as he was about to say something, the sect master of Hatred Heaven sect instinctively looked up, glancing at the sun overhead. "3rd month, early spring. It's not that cold anymore." "Well, I meant to say, let's return to Immortal Slaying Sacred Land first." The Sacred Lord's face turned serious. "Brother, I will stand right here. Don't worry about anything else. Don't make things hard for your brother. If this causes you to catch a chill, then I, your brother, would be guilty of 1,000 deaths. Go back now." "Alright then." The sect master of Hatred Heaven sect was also a bit stunned at this point, half pushed and half willing. He led his people back toward Hatred Heaven city. Ziwei really laid it on thick. He had prepared a whole speech to say, But after a few sentences, he was thrown off and forgot what he wanted to say. With the immortal slaying sacred emperor stationed nearby, news of his presence near Hatred Heaven sect spread quickly. Any keen observer could roughly figure out what was going on. Some came to watch the spectacle, others to lend support. Either way, it meant that in an hour, Fan Yu would definitely make a move. In an instant, nearby forces began to set out, rushing toward Hatred Heaven sect. Gradually, more and more forces gathered around Hatred Heaven city, but the best vantage point, Mount Bo, was firmly occupied by the immortal slaying sacred emperor. As for the sect master of Hatred Heaven sect, he greeted each one with a smile throughout. He never expected their Hatred Heaven sect to have such a good reputation. And the Guangxi Plains, when one side is in trouble, all sides come to aid. Meanwhile, Fan Yu's 100 fully equipped warships sailed through the 9 heavens, racing toward Hatred Heaven sect at breakneck speed. Yu, the patriarch of the Binyang clan, walked up to Chen Fan with a face full of guilt. His voice carried a mix of gratitude and fear. Is this trip going to cost Fan Yu a lot? Chen Fan glanced sideways at the old man, casually said, your own daughter, where is she? You tell me if it's costly or not. The patriarch of the Binyang clan stood frozen in the spot. Do we even need to mention the daughter? With this kind of display, anyone could guess how much it costs. The Binyang clan will formally merge into Fan Yu from now on. In the future, we'll work like oxen and horses for Fan Yu. No, Chen Fan looked at the old man with a strange expression. You're thinking pretty big. Merging into Fan Yu? Fan Yu's recruitment screening is very strict. How are you trying to take? Relax. Outside Hatred Heaven City, more and more forces arrived, gathering outside Hatred Heaven sect. What a lively scene. Just then, what is that? A sudden cry of surprise rose from the crowd. The sacred lord of immortal slaying sacred land followed the direction of the commotion. After seeing clearly, even though he had witnessed many grand spectacles, he was now frozen in place. At first, it was just a faint, iron gray ripple deep in the clouds at the horizon. But as the ripple drew closer, people could see clearly that it was nearly 100 warships. Each warship was like an iron fish magnified several times over. The shock of this silent approach, breaking through the mirror, was utterly terrifying. Especially when the mainstream vehicle was still the skeleton. Especially when the mainstream vehicle is a skeleton. The plains of Guangxi, most people here, were seeing an aerial continent for the first time. As the continent drew near, the various factions gathered around Hatred Heaven City, all turned pale, frozen in place with terror. That is the banner of Jianbei Fan Yu. Fan Yu has truly come, and in the blink of an eye, this aerial continent formation had already flown above Hatred Heaven sect. The next moment, a sound of countless clicks and clanks echoed from the sky, as all the surface plates of the continent suddenly split open, revealing a pitch-black cannon muzzle. The slaughter began. Boom! A deafening roar suddenly rang out. A crimson cannonball, from the continent suspended high in the sky, shot straight toward the center of Hatred Heaven City. With that single strike, the surrounding buildings collapsed almost instantly. The exploding crimson light spread like a plague, sweeping up every living thing it could find. The damage automatically locked on. Then, 1,700 fully uprated divine cannons opened fire. The ground began to tremble violently. The entire sky suddenly darkened. It was not the arrival of eternal night, but the light of the divine cannons, overshadowing the sun itself. All the surrounding factions watching, witnessed the most shocking scene of their lives. Countless crimson cannonballs, like an unending stream, one after another, fell straight toward Hatred Heaven City, so dense that even people dozens of miles away could see them clearly. The sacred lord of the immortal slaying sacred land looked at this scene, his body frozen in place, his lips beginning to tremble slightly, though he had always apologized. When it came to a real fight, the immortal slaying sacred emperor feared nothing, but now he was afraid. The torrent of crimson cannonballs pouring from the divine cannons wove a net in the sky, a three-dimensional web of death covering every inch of space. Not a drop of blood was seen, not a single scream was heard, yet a thick horror of death could be felt. After the time it takes to drink a cup of tea, the crimson torrent pouring from the high sky finally began to fade. The ground stopped shaking. Light slowly returned before their eyes as they readjusted to the sun's radiance. Hatred Heaven City was gone. No city stood before them. Only a bottomless pit remained. Had they not seen it with their own eyes, they would never have believed that a cup of tea ago, a city had stood where this pit now lay, leveled to the ground in just the time it takes to drink a cup of tea. Just then, the 100 aerial continents hovering in the high sky, the one at the very center, surrounded by the others on all sides, slowly descended, landing before the crowd. Chen Fan, accompanied by his entourage, stepped down from the continent. His gaze swept across each of their faces, a warm smile on his face. Allow me to introduce myself, Jianbei Fan Yu, Chen Fan. Pleased to meet you all. The various factions who had come to watch the spectacle had not yet recovered from the shocking scene they had just witnessed. They wanted to open their mouths and say something, but their lips trembled with nervousness. Uttering a single complete sentence was proving difficult. On ordinary days, the most common sight on the Guangxi plains was skeleton horses. When had they ever seen something like this? This was not even on the same level. Lord Chen, immortal slaying sacred emperor, the sacred lord, after forcibly calming his mind, stepped forward, forcing a smile uglier than tears. Why didn't you say anything about coming? I would have come to welcome you. As for Fan Yu's march south, I, the immortal slaying sacred emperor, raised my hand in welcome. Chen Fan smiled lightly as he looked at the sacred lord of the immortal slaying sacred land. Now this is an interesting fellow. Even before I had shown my full strength, he had already sent me quite a few apology letters and blood oaths, making it hard for me to even start a war with the immortal slaying sacred land. Normally speaking, this chicken of the Guangxi plains, it was originally meant to be the holy land of immortal slaying. He said nothing more. Instead, he casually swept his gaze over the crowd around him, then returned to the ark. The ark slowly rose into the air and hovered there. The remaining arks gathered together. Once again, they sped off into the distance. Before long, they vanished from everyone's sight, as if nothing had ever happened, if not for that deep pit. Soon, the surrounding factions dispersed. They had come for the spectacle. They saw the spectacle, and they were also terrified. Not long after, the news of the hatred heaven sect's destruction began to spread like willow catkins after rain, sweeping across the entire Guangxi plain. Tonight, in the Guangxi plain, countless people would toss and turn, unable to sleep, especially those who had witnessed that scene with their own eyes. They had always been in conflict, all for the sake of vying for more resources to develop their clans. But after seeing what happened today, they suddenly felt a sense of release. What was the point of fighting? No matter how hard they fought, they couldn't surpass Fan Yu. Better to just live their own lives properly. And in the dead of night, 100 arcs, under the cover of eternal night, flew once more into the Guangxi plain, until they landed beside a deep pit. This pit was once the city of hatred heaven. The ghostly flames from the 100 arcs spilled out, enveloping the deep pit. A large number of battle team members, carrying shovels and other tools, stepped down from the arcs. They began busily digging. Meat is still meat, even if it's a little. During the day, the main goal was to kill a chicken to scare the monkeys. Yang Fan Yu's name had achieved its purpose. But if a group of people came down at that time to start digging things out of the pit, it would have been somewhat embarrassing. So he decided to come dig at night instead. Still, it seemed those factions were quite sensible. Not a single one had coveted the legacy left in Hatred Heaven City. He had even thought that if some faction had taken it, he would have paid them a visit tonight for a meal. Toad. Chen Fan stood on the deck, gazing at the Fan Yu members busy in the deep pit. He mused that from now on, the various factions of the Guangxi plain would, for a short time, be much more obedient. He could begin laying down the high-speed rail network and signal towers across the Guangxi plain. Once these things were laid down, it meant this entire region was his territory. But Chen Fan stood on the city wall with a grim expression, saying nothing. Normally speaking, 7 days ago, he should have started advancing the signal towers and high-speed rail network, but laying the high-speed rail required YY's assistance. He hadn't seen YY in a long time, and he missed her quite a bit, so he came to the new continent in person to find YY. He never expected that upon arrival, he would learn that YY had already gone missing. She had now been missing for over 10 days. Before leaving, YY had left the Beast Pavilion Master's identity token in the city, making it impossible for them to track her through the token. Now, no one knew where YY had gone. She was definitely on this continent, but this continent was as vast as the mainland. Wang Mezi had been exploring for so long, and still hadn't finished. To think of finding a single crocodile, how difficult was that? Master, the lame man standing beside him, his eyes full of guilt and panic, whispered, "It's not your fault." Chen Fan shook his head, frowned and said, "You're in charge of all the mining operations on this new continent by yourself. You're already stretched thin. You can't be watching YY every day." But the question is, did YY leave Fan Yu on her own, or was she lured away? Did she get lost? Given YY's strength, it's hard for any ghost or monster to harm her, but if she didn't run away from home, then things are bad. He looked toward the thunderstorm in the distance by the sea. Could that thunderstorm be the culprit, luring YY over there? But YY usually only likes to eat. No particular hobbies. What could be so captivating that even YY would leave his most beloved Beast Pavilion Master token behind, leaving New Continent Outpost 1? Could it be? Chen Fan stood frozen in place, thinking of the only possibility. Just then, the ship talisman at Zhu Hu's chest suddenly rang. "Prison Master, Wang Mezi is back. In about an hour or so, he'll arrive at New Continent Outpost 1. He says he's brought back an important discovery." Chen Fan answered with some irritation. Over an hour later, Wang Mezi came before Chen Fan. He was about to speak of the major discovery in the new continent, but suddenly noticed that on the distant sea, many ships and feathered beasts could faintly be seen, searching continuously along the thunderstorm sea. His expression shifted slightly. Just as I thought, prison master, is the thunderstorm sea showing signs of collapse? Yes. Chen Fan sighed softly. YY has been missing. After ruling out all possibilities, I suspect there's something inside the thunderstorm sea that created an illusion of YY's parents, luring him to enter it willingly. Wang Mazi stood frozen for a long time, then looked blankly at the feathered beasts and ships searching in the distance, then at the prison master and Kuai Hu beside him. Somewhat bewildered, he said, Prison master, what are you talking about? Didn't you send YY to dig for earth veins in that deep pit? On my way back, I even saw YY digging earth veins in that pit. I waved at him, and he kept waving his grey claws back at me. What? Chen Fan was stunned at first, then frowned deeply. He turned to look at Zhu Hu. Did you give that order? I didn't. Kuai Hu anxiously pulled out a ship talisman from his robe. Contacting Kai Yu. Kai Yu, did you order YY to dig for earth veins? Kai Yu's voice soon rang from the talisman. No, I didn't. I've been busy mining this whole time. Good. Chen Fan suddenly smiled, a cold glint flashing in his eyes. Someone in the prison can give orders in my place now. He turned and worked toward a feathered beast. Let's go. Find YY. I'm quite curious who gave that order. Zhu Fu and Wang Mezi exchanged a glance, both seeing the unease in each other's eyes. They quickly followed. From New Continent Outpost 1, the distance to the deep pit Wang Mezi had found was a full 3 days' journey. Chen Fan traveled day and night, arriving at the pit before dark on the second day. Soon, he saw YY below, digging alone with all his might. Anger flickered in his eyes. No feathered beasts, no high-speed transport. YY had come all this way alone, digging by himself. How lonely it must be to dig alone. Only YY could know. No matter who inside gave the order, whether as a joke or a test, this matter would not end so easily. The feathered beast slowly descended. Hearing the noise, YY looked up. When he saw Chen Fan, he let out a slight cry. Then, seeing Wang Mezi standing beside Chen Fan, his lantern-sized eyes suddenly flashed with anger. He roared. His posture clearly showed he had been wronged. Now that his master had arrived, he cried out in grievance and fury. Zhu Hu silently sidestepped, cutting as much distance as possible from Wang Mezi. Could it be that Wang Mezi wanted to claim credit privately and gave YY that order? That would be the full moon, and YY actually listened to Wang Mezi's command. In an instant, Wang Mezi's face turned pale. This is damn unfair. On my way back, didn't I wave at him friendly? Why is he roaring at me now? It really has nothing to do with me. Chen Fan ignored Wang Mezi's expression. He simply worked down from the feathered beast, leaning on his staff, and stood beside YY, beginning to torque. The combination of the corpse and its gaze. After the time it takes to finish a cup of tea, Chen Fan stepped back onto the Africa. Following behind him was YY, his face full of grievance. Zhu Fu keenly noticed that the anger in the young master's eyes had faded, replaced instead by a hint of helplessness. He realized that this matter would not escalate into a serious situation. He tentatively asked who had given the order. One of the pavilion masters. Which pavilion master? The beast pavilion master. Zhu Fu was somewhat dumbfounded. Chen Fan let out a long sigh, then, unable to hold back any longer, he raised his hand and knocked on YY's head, laughing in extreme anger. You can give yourself orders now, you bastard. Do you know how many resources were used to find you these past few days? So many members of the breeding division risked being swept into the thunderstorm sea to search for you there, and in the end, you gave yourself the order to come here and dig up earth essence. From such a distance, you really managed to run all the way here yourself. Wang Mezi, standing to the side, let out a long sigh of relief, clearly not implicated in this, but he was still somewhat puzzled. Lord Yu, what happened? It's a long story. Chen Fan sighed helplessly. The last time YY returned to the breeding division, I was sitting on the city wall thinking about the next steps. YY was lying at my feet. I casually said, it's almost my birthday again. YY remembered those words and decided to give me a gift. He thought I would definitely love the earth essence here, so he wanted to dig up enough of it to surprise me. Then he went to Zhao Shengping and asked for a large batch of braised food, took some drinks, left his identity token in the city, and ran for several days, from New Continent Outpost 1 all the way here, and started mining earth essence. If you hadn't happened to pass by and found him, I really don't know how long it would have taken to find him. This silly moose is giving me a headache right now. Wang Mezi looked over in confusion at YY, who was baring his teeth at him. So when you passed by him, he showed you his white paw, not to greet you, but to ask you to keep it a secret. Now, in his eyes, you're an untrustworthy snitch. Wang Mezi stood there, even more bewildered. Who the hell could understand that? That white paw meant keep it a secret, not to mention I didn't get it. Even if I had, After returning to the outpost and seeing the surge water, there's no way I could have kept it a secret. Let's go. Chen Fan patted Wai's head, somewhat exasperated. Come back to Jianbei with me to build the high-speed rail. Just then, he suddenly felt a heavy weight drop into his palm. He looked down at Wai, who timidly spat a piece of earth essence into his hand. His voice trailed off. After a brief pause, he suddenly laughed. Forget it, no matter what. This is indeed the first birthday gift I've ever received. Thank you, Wai. Wai became excited, his tail starting to wag back and forth as usual, tapping against the Afriker's deck. After finding Wai, Chen Fan's mood also improved, but he still told Wai very seriously. In the future, for any action, you must not leave your identity token behind, and you are not to act on your own. 3 days later, the group returned to New Continent Outpost 1. Wang Mezi stood on the platform, watching, as Yuju walked into the breeding division, high-speed rail station with Wai, and sighed with some emotion. Running from here to the deep pit is no small distance. Wai really put his heart into it. But just then, he slapped his forehead, suddenly remembering something, and said with some frustration, I almost forgot. I came to report the discoveries from exploring the new continent. With all this delay, I've forgotten what I was going to say. Zuhu looked at Wang Mezi. Is it important? If not, I'll pass it on to the young master. If it is important, you're taking the high-speed rail back to Fanyu right now. An in-person report isn't that important. Wang Mezi scratched the back of his head. It's just that I discovered, because the heavenly Dao of the new continent has died, this continent is slowly crumbling. Before long, it'll probably shatter into pieces entirely. Zuhu stared expressionlessly at Wang Mezi. Without a moment's hesitation, he immediately pulled a red sound transmission talisman from his chest. This was Fanyu's highest grade sound transmission talisman. Once activated, it signified an urgent crisis. No. Wang Mezi quickly pressed down Zuhu's hand. Don't rush. When I said before long, I meant relative to this continent's lifespan. The cracks haven't spread to us yet. I estimate it'll take at least another 70 or 80 years. By then, we'll have already dug up all the ghost corpses here. Don't get worked up just yet. You're the one who made it sound so terrifying. Terrifying? Do you think so? Seems a bit, yeah. Chen Fan sat inside Fanyu's high-speed rail carriage, speeding forward through the undersea tunnel. At his ears, he could occasionally hear another high-speed train whistling past from the opposite direction. He turned to glance, its claws resting on the train's tail, and smiled faintly. Leaning back in his seat, he closed his eyes to rest. This matter was settled for now. Meanwhile, Chen Fan also received a message from Wang Mezi about the new continent. Based on Wang Mezi's observations of the cracks in the new continent these past days, he had detected that the new continent would completely collapse in about 70 to 80 years, unless a new heavenly Dao was added during that time, which might prevent the new continent's destruction. He chuckled. The heavenly Dao isn't a body doll. You can't just add one on a whim. Where would I find a heavenly Dao? But he forcefully gazed at the eternal Night Lord deep within his soul. Overlord's dominion. Your ghost fire will absorb energy from the night. Daily, no need for ghost fire as shame. When you light up ghost fires in all regions of our continent, will receive special reward. Overlord's dominion. It was clearly written above. On all regions of our continent, not just eternal night continent counts, but the new continent too. So he had actually considered covering the new continent with ghost fire, claiming this descent. Once Wang Mezi had explored the new continent enough, he blanketed it with level 6 ghost fire and seized the Overlord's dominion reward. After muttering Overlord's dominion to himself, he got up and returned to Fanyu. A moment later, Chen Fan stood on the wall of Cave No. Wang, his gaze crossing the canyon toward the nameless mountain beyond, dotting the northern river coastline, the faintly visible northern river houses. Now, the 170-kilometer northern river defense line was complete, but it was just an empty shell. Only walls, with no turrets or other defensive logistics buildings. A wall that couldn't fight back would eventually be worn down by ghost nests. He still needed to stockpile more ghost stones to fully fill out the northern river defense line. There were still 2.5 years until the undersea ghost nests landed, 2 more rainy seasons to endure, then endless ghost nests would land from the northern river. Let's go. After hearing Wang Qi's report, Chen Fan, with Wai and 2 Fanyu members, set off on the journey. Over the next period, Fanyu's plan was to build high-speed rails and signal towers on the Guangxi Plain. He'd be away from Fanyu for a while, but before leaving, he used a heavenly Dao stone on Fanyu's core, building the ghost fire. The next moment, a panel appeared before him. You have used a heavenly Dao stone on the ghost fire. Obtain 3 heavenly Dao blessing effects. Please choose one from the 100 streams. Heavenly Dao blessing effect. 1. Enduring flow. The ghost fire absorbs energy from the liquid, condensing 1,000 ghost stones daily. Only effective for 1 ghost fire. 2. Heavenly Dao blessing effect. 1 more chance. When operating all buildings in the camp, if a forced upgrade direction is triggered, you can have one chance to rescreen. Rescreening will not change the rating of the system upgrade direction, but it will randomly replace one system upgrade direction. 3rd edition, secondary service effect. Rule over all nations. The ghost fires forged and placed within the camp's range. Each upgrade will no longer require heavenly treasures and earthly treasures. Only ghost stones are needed. Chen Fan looked at the 3 options in the panel before him. Heavenly Dao Blessing Effect. After a moment of stunned silence, he suddenly grinned. Without any hesitation, he chose the 3rd option. The rule over all nations Heaven's Blessing Effect would allow him to forge and set up ghost fires without consuming any heavenly treasures or earthly treasures. Only ghost stones would be needed. This also meant that once Wang Mezi finished surveying the continent and created the ghost skin map of the entire new continent, he could begin to fill the entire new continent with ghost fires and claim that special reward of ruling the world. Not bad at all, Chen Fan said with a smile. He strode toward the 95 dragon chariot beside him. First, lay down the high-speed rail lines on the western plains. Once Wang Mezi finishes drawing the ghost skin map of the new continent, then he could start planning this matter. The dragon horse Si Ming steered the 95 dragon chariot out of the harbor, and once again rode across the northern wasteland, heading straight south toward the Jiangnan region. Fan Yu officially headed south as time flew by. In this month and a half, Chen Fan hadn't returned to Fan Yu even once. He had been on the western plains the entire time, laying down his high-speed rail lines and signal towers. Chen Fan stepped down from the 95 dragon chariot. Somewhat tiredly, he tapped his own shoulder. He was nearly losing his mind, exhausted to the point he could barely catch his breath. But in just a few days, the Western Plains high-speed rail would officially open for service, and at this moment, he had arrived at the main pass. He stood still, his gaze crossed the main pass, looking toward the eastern plains further south. He murmured dazedly, the 7th defense line. He had already received the news, sent back by Xianxia. According to Xianxia's message, the battle at the Eternal Night Shop was fierce and stalemated. They could no longer spare any aid for the 7th defense line. If the 7th defense line were breached again this time, then it might truly fall completely. So he had another plan. That was to cover the eastern plains with high-speed rail lines and signal towers. That way, if anything happened, he would know about it immediately. He wouldn't be left in the north, completely unaware, while the eastern plains were already overrun. Then he turned and climbed back into the carriage. The fine new member sitting in the driver's seat cracked the whip. The 95 dragon chariot rolled through the ruins before everyone's eyes, heading straight into the depths of the eastern plains. Better to finish it all in one go before returning to Fan Yu, and rest slowly. The 95 dragon chariot continued deeper into the eastern plains, constantly laying down high-speed rail networks and setting up signal towers, until the time came to the 10th day of the 7th month. Under the scorching sun, Chen Fan personally soared the 7th defense line. He stepped down from the carriage, his expression solemn as he gazed into the distance at that endless wall. The 7th defense line, nearly touching heaven and earth. The city walls here were all level 6. If such walls were guarding the north would be absolutely safe. This also showed that the pressure on the eastern plains was greater than that on the north. A ghost nest that had once breached such a massive defense line. In their prime, they stood dozens of meters high. The time left for him was truly running out. He had to develop as much as possible within this period, to a sufficiently high level. Prison Master Xianxia appeared out of thin air beside him, his expression somewhat excited as he looked at Chen Fan. You're here. I'll go find the person in charge of the 7th defense line right now. Let him come receive you. I haven't told them my true identity yet. Chen Fan, standing by the 95 dragon chariot, didn't turn around. He gazed far ahead at that 7th defense line. He could faintly see beneath the 7th defense line many people moving back and forth. He hadn't seen so many people along this entire journey. They were all gathered here. He lightly shook his head. No need to tell them your true identity either. Just come with me directly. Xianxia was slightly stunned. He hesitated for a moment, looking back at the 7th defense line behind him. He still nodded, quickly contacted the other members of the Dark Chamber. He hadn't yet said goodbye to those friends of his. These days, he had made quite a few friends. Forget it, there will always be a chance to see him again later. Chen Fan turned around and returned to the 95 Dragon Crown, preparing to head back. He knew the importance of the 7th defense line, but he didn't want to come into contact with the person in charge of the 7th defense line. For now, it wasn't the right time yet. His strength was still insufficient. If he got too deeply involved, he could easily be taken as a blood bag by the Eternal Night Den. He could guard Janbei, and even support the Kanto Plain. He could still contribute his own strength to the entire Eternal Night continent, but being a blood bag was out of the question. After all the Dark Chamber members had gathered here, the 95 Dragon Chariot began speeding toward the Kansai Plain. Time to go home. He had been out here for far too long this time. Early July, year 380 of the general calendar. The tracks of the breeding high-speed rail were successfully laid across the Kansai Plain and every corner of the Kanto Plain. Thus, the influence of breeding expanded once again. At the 7th defense line, the recruiter whose low body had been severed at the waist now sat before the dining table, staring at the 2 portions of food on his table without touching them, remaining silent for a long time. After an unknown time, the people around him had gradually dwindled. The meal time had already passed, yet there was still no sign of that young man. Only then did he pick up his chopsticks and slowly begin eating his own portion. On ordinary days, that fellow would always eat with him before nightfall, but today he didn't come, and he had just learned that the group of people who came with that fellow had also disappeared, so he understood in his heart they had left. The pressure brought by the ghost nest over these past 6 months had made that fellow unable to hold on any longer, especially now that the rainy season was about to arrive. That weight pressing on everyone's hearts made it hard for many to breathe. Every day, quite a few people ran away. It was only normal, especially since that fellow wasn't even from Kanto. It was perfectly normal for him to run, but for some reason, today's food didn't taste as good as usual. Hey, Uncle Liu, a young man sidled up to the table, then ceremoniously picked up the untouched portion and shoveled it into his mouth. Since that guy ran off, I'll eat this meal. I just didn't get enough to eat, so this is just right. The middle-aged man didn't speak, only lowered his head and continued eating his own food. Uncle Liu, have you noticed something strange? And the 7th defense line, all the disabled people whose bodies were severed by the ghost nest infection only have upper bodies. I've never seen anyone with only a lower body. Isn't that strange? The young man's face was serious as he rambled. Uncle Liu's mouth was full of food, and he mumbled indistinctly. The middle-aged man finally moved, raising his head to stare at the young man, expressionless. Do you think you're funny? The young man sheepishly put down his bowl and chopsticks. I just saw you seem a bit down, Uncle Liu, so I came to cheer you up. I'm not leaving. I'll definitely stay and guard the 7th room with you. You can go, but I'm really not leaving. My family and friends all died in Kanto. If I die, I'll die in Kanto too. The middle-aged man didn't say anything more, only staring dazedly at the darkness beyond the ghost fire, which was rapidly spreading from afar. After a long while, he muttered, "Could it be, can just like that? At least say goodbye before you leave. I could have given you some travel money." Faintly, the howls of countless ghost nests reached his ears, coming from outside the 7th defense line. The ghost nest had begun another assault. A new night of battle had begun. I'm heading off first, today, and in charge of Section 7, replenishing the ghost ammunition for 10 turrets. The young man across from him, after the eternal night descended, quickly scraping the remaining 2 mouthfuls of rice from the bowl, shoveling it all into his mouth in one go, mumbling indistinctly as he sprinted off into the distance, soon vanishing into the crowd without a trace. A person like this, to the function of defense line no. 7, to be said to be nearly negligible, but defense line no. 7, guarding the Guandan Plain, was precisely composed of countless such negligible individuals, becoming immensely formidable, standing unyielding. Early July, year 380 of the eternal night calendar, political scorching heat. Chen Fan returned to Fanyu, lying on the bed in the wooden cabin of Cave No. 1, turning his head to the side, gazing at the eternal night calendar hanging on the wall. Once this rainy season passes, until the undersea ghost nests land, there will be exactly 2 full years left. After months of hard work, finally laying down all the high-speed rail tracks, these past few days, the existence of the Fanyu high-speed rail had also reshaped the power dynamics of the entire Guangxi Plain. The most notable point was, in the past century, the pattern of various forces in the Guangxi Plain constantly dividing and occupying had been broken, while skeleton horse sales declined. The entire Guangxi Plain gradually became more peaceful. Then, after stretching his body, he arrived at the Jianbei defense line. Chen Fan stood on the city wall of the Jianbei defense line, gazing into the distance across the 4 seas, waves continuously crashing against the reefs. Yet over the past few months, Fanyu had accumulated quite a bit of ghost time. He could finally fully supplement the city defense structures of the Jianbei defense line completely. After finishing the illness, he arrived at the end of the Jianbei defense line and saw that familiar skeleton horse, then began building the city defense structures from scratch. Divine cannon copper tubes, anti-aircraft guns, and so on. One structure after another was rapidly completed, until nightfall. Chen Fan finally stopped building. It would still take several more days to finish the planned constructions. Then he descended the city wall of Jianbei Fang County, returning once again to Wuming Mountain. Returning to the wooden cabin, he sprawled out on the bed in a big X shape. I can't go on, and really exhausted this time. Let's rest for a day first. Soon, the sound of gentle snoring filled the room. Chen Fan slept soundly this time. He even had a dream, a rare occurrence. He dreamed that Janbeifang County, 2.5 years later, was completely destroyed by the ghost nest surging from the seabed. Janbei fell, countless lives perished, and Fanyu was the first to fall just before death. He saw a great fish, cold and stunning, exploding like a starry sky within the ghost nest, wiping out all ghost huts in a large area. But soon, this empty area was filled again by endless ghost nests. He looked at all this helplessly and unwillingly. No more backup plans remain. Just as he was about to be overwhelmed by the ghost tide, the chill drifted in. Chen Fan shuddered and woke from the dream. Stepping out of the cabin, he stood on the city wall of Cave No. 1, gazing at the retreating darkness and the sun hanging mid-sky. This sleep had lasted straight until mid-morning. Tui, dreams and reality are opposites. He muttered under his breath about how unlucky last night's dream was. As the 4-year deadline gradually approached, he also grew somewhat tense, based on the ghost nests experienced in the ancient battlefield. The defense line he built with level 5 city walls could basically hold them off, as long as his stored ghost stones weren't depleted. But no one knew if, after all these years, this batch of ghost nests had grown stronger. After all, even defense line No. 7, with its uniform level 6 walls, had been breached during this rainy season, narrowly avoiding total collapse. I need to prepare a bit more thoroughly. A moment later, while building structures, he summoned Xianxia to learn the specific details of defense line No. 7. You wanted to see me? Xianxia quickly arrived at Chen Fan's side. Chen Fan nodded lightly. While building, Chen Fan casually asked, "You've been at defense line No. 7 for half a year now. Tell me about defense line No. 7. Everything you know, share it." "Yes." Xianxia's expression turned serious. He pulled a small notebook from his chest, glanced down quickly, then began. "It only starts reporting now. Defense line 7 is not on the front lines of the Eternal Night Continent. Rather, it is a secondary defense line behind the Eternal Night Continent. The ghost nests it faces are not as severe as those on the front lines, but they are still the largest ghost nests I have ever seen in my life. Even outside the rainy season, the ghost nests during normal times are overwhelming. Tens of millions of ghostly creatures, after nightfall, climb ashore from the seawater and launch attacks on the defense line, fearless of death. Defense line 7 spans 97 kilometers in total. The common turret type is a green-grade structure known as the Sword Turret. Operating it to max level requires no rare treasures. 100,000 ghost stones can build one. Besides that, there is also a dark tower, a yellow braid city defense structure, 1 per kilometer, used to deal with the braided ghosts within the nests. Its single target attack power is immense, but its consumption is equally enormous. The rest includes numerous anti-air turrets. On a vast open field outside defense line 7, large-scale ghost clamps have been planted. These are a special type of plant. When mature, touching them triggers a massive explosion. Their maturation period is 1 year and they cannot be moved. Once mature, they automatically sprout and emerge. After the rainy season ended, Defense Line 7 then arranges for people to sow ghost clamps on a large scale outside the city walls. The seeds, by the time the next rainy season approaches, will have just matured. These ghost clamps will greet the first large wave of the rainy season's ghost tide. Chen Fan nodded slightly. After a long pause, he finally spoke again. "How much do you know about the Eternal Night Hall?" Tan Qiu lowered his head and thought carefully for a moment, then replied, "This organization is the largest one on the Eternal Night Continent. It's not an organization. Any force willing to contribute to the Eternal Night Continent can join this organization. After joining, there are no obligations nor any rewards, but contributions are required to make contributions to protecting the Eternal Night Continent. Rather than calling it an organization, it's more like all the forces of the Eternal Night Continent joining together, united to protect the Eternal Night Continent. Those with ghost stones contribute ghost stones. Those with manpower contribute manpower. The organization doesn't even have a single architect, so they go to forces that haven't yet joined the Eternal Night Hall to demand ghost stones. As for the overall commander of Defense Line 7, he has never even met the master of the Eternal Night Hall, nor has he ever been to the heartland of the Eternal Night Continent. He is a native of the Guanan region, originally the leader of a force. Later, that force was destroyed, and the original commander died. He took command in a time of crisis and became the overall commander, responsible for the overall deployment of Defense Line 7. Moreover, before the last rainy season, because the ghost stones accumulated over the years were insufficient, Defense Line 7 sent a request for support to the Eternal Night Hall. The Eternal Night Hall initially refused, but later gave a reply, saying they had done their utmost to dispatch 100 million ghost stones to the Guandan Plain. However, en route, a spy leaked the information, and the ghost race received the news. They spared no cost to forcefully break through a secondary defense line. When this batch of ghost stones passed through the Qiming Basin, they intercepted them. The transport vessel was sunk, The Eternal Night Hall informed Defense Line 7 of this news and stated that they had no surplus ghost stones to provide support. At the 7th Defense Line, hoping Defense Line 7 could hold out as best as possible, Shen Fan suddenly stopped his forging movements. Below the transport vessel, the city wall that had been slowly moving also came to a halt. His brow furrowed. He turned his head to look at Xiaoqiu. You just said spy? He didn't understand. If two forces are at war with each other, having spies is normal. But when the ghost race is at war with humanity, how could there possibly be spies? Would humans actually choose to defect to the ghost tombs? Xiaoqiu nodded. This time, in the front lines of the Eternal Night continent. Thus, the battle situation was extremely critical. A major reason was the arrival of the Eternal Night. Many ghostly beings had awakened a certain level of intelligence. They knew how to use tactics. They were very troublesome. Meanwhile, almost everyone, including those in the Eternal Night Hall, understood. The Eternal Night continent likely couldn't hold out this time. Yet they still fought with all their might to resist. Even if they couldn't hold out, they couldn't let the ghost nest land so easily. And as long as they persisted, miracles would always appear. Some ghost houses would use various methods to infiltrate the Eternal Night Hall, making promises that any human willing to defect to them now, when their ghost race completely occupied the Eternal Night continent, would have a region set aside for these discerning humans to live in. There were quite a few spies within the Eternal Night Hall. As far as I know, both the ghost race and the Eternal Night Hall had learned of the vacancy in the Jiangbei defense line. The ghost race was constantly inquiring about when the Eternal Night Hall would send reinforcements to Jiangbei, preparing to repeat the same tactic. Let the ghost nest in Jiangbei land from the north bank, then march south all the way into the Guangxi plain, then, coordinating from within and without, capture Defense Line 7, then head east into the heart of the Eternal Night continent. Shen Fan was silent for a long time. He knew the frontline battle in the Eternal Night was urgent, but he hadn't expected it to have reached such a state. For now, the frontline could still hold, but the Jiangbei Defense Line and Defense Line 7 had become the top priority. Once these two defense lines were breached, the entire behemoth of the Eternal Night continent could very likely collapse instantly. The near-fall of Defense Line 7 during the rainy season was mainly due to a shortage of ghost stones. Yes, Xiaoqiu let out a long sigh, then finished his report. He stood behind Chen Fan without a word. All the information he reported was as free of subjective emotion as possible. He deeply loathed those traitors from the bottom of his heart. If not for the traitors, the Eternal Night continent wouldn't be in such a difficult position at the 7th defense line, nor would it be this hard. Chen Fan also continued to build structures one after another, but he remained silent for a long time. Master and servant, the two of them just didn't speak. After a long while, Chen Fan finally spoke softly. I will send aid to Defense Line 7, with you personally handling it. Don't tell Defense Line 7 that the aid comes from the fan domain in Jiangbei. Just say it's aid from an unknown force. If possible, try to make Defense Line 7 not report this matter to the Eternal Night Hall either. Xiaoqiu was slightly stunned. Then, with a serious expression, he responded, yes. He knew Fang Yu was also facing an extremely difficult situation. The ghost nest at the bottom of the river in Jiangbei was about to land, yet Fang Yu had not received a single ghost stone from the Eternal Night Hall. The funded section was a total of 97 kilometers long. Shen Fan murmured softly, maybe, if you place one Soul Guardian sculpture, you'd need about 970 Soul Guardian sculptures. In total, that would require around 2.5 million ghost stones. Before the rainy season, Fang Yu, the first batch of aid for Defense Line 7, would be 970 Soul Guardian sculptures. Each Soul Guardian sculpture can reduce the cost of all turrets within its range by 40%, but it consumes. This would be a tremendous help to Defense Line 7. He couldn't provide too many ghost stones. He didn't have enough ghost stones for himself, but he couldn't just watch Defense Line 7 fall. Besides the Soul Guardian sculptures, he could also support Defense Line 7 with a batch of copper tubes and altars, as well as Soul Cannon. This could greatly enhance the wall defenses and firepower of Defense Line 7. However, the copper tubes couldn't be transported by high-speed rail. He would need to go to Defense Line 7 himself to forge them. He was still considering this before he had enough strength to protect himself. He didn't want to have too deep an interaction with the Eternal Night Hall. No one knew whether some traitor would leak his information to the ghost race, unless he went anonymously or in disguise. That's one way to do it. It won't fool them for long, but every bit of time counts. It can buy the propagation a little more time to develop. Right now, time is what we lack most. If only we could pause the war. After a long while, Chen Fan stopped his forging work. He turned his head to look at Xiaoqiu. Back when I told you to leave, I noticed you hesitated. I made some friends at Defense Line 7. Xiaoqiu's eyes darted away, a little embarrassed. Chen Fan paused for a moment, then gazed out at the distant sea. He said softly, today, I'll forge a batch of world soul sculptures. You'll lead the team. Tomorrow, they'll be shipped to Defense Line 7 by high-speed rail. Yes. Cherokee nodded heavily, his excitement clear. After Cherokee left, Chen Fan stood at the edge of the African deck, stretching lazily with satisfaction. Today's Jiangbei Defense Line forging plan is suspended. First, forge 1,000 world soul sculptures, and send them to Defense Line 7. As for me, I'll first survive the ghost nest 2.5 years from now. He looked out at the turbulent sea. He had never seen the ghost nest land from the seabed with his own eyes. He didn't know if he could hold the line. The next day, Cherokee led his team onto the high-speed rail heading for the Kanto Plain. They sped toward the Kanto Plain. As night approached, the quiet Defense Line 7 began to stir with activity. Eternal night was about to fall. Preparations had to begin, and the recruiter who had lost both legs, as usual, leaned on his crutches, got his meal, and worked to the table beside him. This time, he only got one portion. Uncle Liu, having gotten his meal, looked at the empty seat before him. He couldn't help but instinctively glance back. He felt as if Xianxia was standing behind him, grinning and greeting him as always, but the crowd flowed past, and there was no sign of Xianxia. Realizing this, he shook his head and chuckled, as if mocking himself, then picked up his bowl and chopsticks to eat. He was much older than Xianxia, but in this place, cross-generational friendship was normal. When he saw Xianxia, it was like seeing his younger self, fearless and brave, confident, just like his younger self. But Xianxia was smarter than he had been at that age. If he had run back then, he wouldn't have lost his legs. Just then, suddenly, the crowd around him grew noisy. Uncle Liu was startled. He put down his bowl and chopsticks, instinctively looking up toward the defense line ahead. Can the ghost nest be attacking as soon as night falls? But soon, he noticed everyone's gazes were fixed behind him. He turned to look. There, a land dragon was racing at incredible speed across the Kanto Plain, heading straight for them. The piercing sound scattered the gray mist, bringing a spark of life to the previously summer Defense Line 7. This was a change that Defense Line 7 hadn't seen in months. Murmurs rose all around. What is that? I've never seen anything like it. Could it be reinforcements from the Eternal Night Shop? Have reinforcements finally arrived? Then do we have a chance to survive this rainy season? Uncle Liu said nothing. His eyes reddened instantly. Leaning on his crutches, he stood as straight as he could, gazing fixedly at that land dragon. He laughed, his voice trembling. He cursed with a smile. You little brat. From the front carriage of the land dragon, Xianxia leaned out, grinning at him as always, waving and shouting, Uncle Liu, Xianxia, and back, damn it. The propagation high-speed rail stopped about 1,000 meters from Defense Line 7. This was the end of the tracks. Many members of Defense Line 7 gathered around. Uncle Liu swung his crutches vigorously, rushing to the front as fast as he could. Uncle Liu. Xianxia jumped off the high-speed rail. Looking at Uncle Liu, he grinned widely. It's been a few days since I last saw you. Did you miss me? My master learned of the situation at Defense Line 7, and specially sent me to deliver support. Here, he pointed at the long line of high-speed train cars behind him, filled with sculptures. Soul-release sculptures can reduce the turret's ammunition consumption by 40%. This batch of soul-release sculptures is enough to cover the entire Defense Line 7. A unified chorus of agreement echoed from the depths of the hall. The surrounding members of Defense Line 7 all froze in place, their eyes filled with shock. Only after a long moment did they snap out of it, excitedly pounding each other's shoulders. Deng, he wanted to say something, but couldn't utter a single word. Reduce ammunition consumption by 40%. It's not ghost stones for support, yet it far surpasses them. This means they might survive this rainy season. Quick. Uncle Liu's lips turned white, and he stood up, trembling with excitement. He turned to the person beside him and urged urgently, Curry, to find Elder 7. He wanted to say something else, but after hearing the effect of these soul-release sculptures, he could no longer care about anything else. No need to look. I'm here. The crowd parted, and an old man with white hair, followed by 2 or 3 others, rode a skeletal horse swiftly toward them. As he neared the crowd, he dismounted with agile grace, his eyes slightly reddening as he looked at Xianxia. He said hoarsely, Can it really reduce the turret's ammunition consumption by 40%? Not a single word of falsehood. Xianxia's expression was serious. How many are there? 1,000, enough to cover the entire Defense Line 7. Are you all reinforcements sent by the Eternal Night Hall? No. Xianxia shook his head. They are reinforcements sent by my master, but due to certain special circumstances, my master does not wish to reveal his faction's name, and he also hopes, Elder 7, that you will conceal this aid from the Eternal Night Hall. Fine. The white-haired old man, his lips trembling, tears glistening in his eyes, said, No matter which faction you come from, this debt of gratitude, every member of Defense Line 7 will remember it. Then he took a deep breath, composed himself, and forced a smile. Come this way, I'll have a feast prepared immediately. No need for feast. Xianxia shook his head, pointing at the darkening sky above. It's getting dark. Let's set up the soul release sculptures first. The sooner they're in place, the sooner we save ghost stones. As dusk fell, the eternal night would soon arrive as scheduled. Nearby members of Defense Line 7 also began to move. Soon, dark mist as thick as ink once again enveloped the entire continent. Xianxia, followed by members of the Dark Pavilion, worked behind Elda 7, ascending the walls of Defense Line 7. The moment the eternal night descended, the sea surface seemed to boil, with waves surging endlessly. In almost an instant, a thick, foul stench wafted over. Looking out, an almost endless horde of ghostly figures rushed out from the seawater, roaring as they charged toward Defense Line 7. At the same time, the sword-feather turrets stationed on Defense Line 7 had their surface patterns glowing with white light. At nearly the same moment, all the enemy-repelling sword-feather turrets activated. Countless cold white light swords, each about the size of a palm, rained down in a near-blanketing strike, engulfing the ghostly horde. Elder 7 stood by his sword-feather turret the entire time, his eyes fixed on the consumption of ghost stones. After about the time it takes to burn a stick of incense, the excitement in his eyes grew ever stronger. It's real. It really can reduce the turret's ghost stone consumption by 40%. This is a tremendous boon for Defense Line 7. Thank you. Elder 7 took a deep breath, his eyes slightly moist. He looked at Xianxia. Across the entire Guandan plain, only I can contact the Eternal Night Hall. I swear, I will never leak this information. I didn't expect what happened last time either, but you must believe me, it wasn't that matter. Xianxia shook his head. You definitely are not. If you were, Line 7 would have fallen long ago. He knew what the 7 elders were talking about. Last time, during the rainy season, the Eternal Night Sect sent 7 Grandmaster-level architects to provide support. But on their return journey, they were all assassinated, killed by their own people. This incident had always weighed heavily on the 7 elders' conscience. Thus, the 7 elders could also understand why the force helping him chose to remain anonymous. By the way, there's something else. Last time Line 7 was breached, the Eternal Night Continent sent 7 Grandmaster-level architects, and at the same time, they also dispatched a Night Watcher with cultivation nearly at the Martial Saint level. Normally speaking, Night Watchers cannot improve their own cultivation. Do you know how that Night Watcher, nearly at Martial Saint level, managed to achieve it? The prison master didn't let him ask about this matter. It was something he wanted to know himself. The 7 elders were silent for a long time before speaking hoarsely. Night Watchers have a unique trait. Their bodies are like formations, capable of sealing and compressing immense energy. The formation patterns formed by their blood meridians brutally suppress the energy within their bodies. Once activated, it is the day the formation's energy erupts. Although Night Watchers possess tremendous power, they are utterly helpless when facing ghost nests. Later, the Eternal Night Sect accidentally discovered a special phenomenon, that a Night Watcher's body has no upper limit. By sealing and compressing vast amounts of energy, once activated, the resulting power would be astonishing. When the milky white liquid from liquefying hundreds of ghost stones is forcibly compressed into a Night Watcher's body, the energy transformed from those ghost stones will be sealed within the Night Watcher's body. At first, the Night Watcher will endure extreme agony, but gradually, slowly, the body will adapt to this pain, and the upper limit of what the body can seal will also increase. At that point, this Night Watcher becomes a second-level cultivator. They can unleash far greater power than ordinary Night Watchers. By repeating this process, they can become martial kings, martial emperors, or even martial saint Night Watchers. Although the level of pain will continuously increase, a Night Watcher of this cultivation level